Against him, like me.
That's awesome.
That's what's good.
5:30. All right, well, it is 5:30.
My dad was Navy, so.
Huh?
And it's-
Oh, okay.
I was like, no, thanks, I've seen everything, and I like. That's funny. That's cool though. Yeah, that's interesting to meet. Where you? See, like. Just.
Oh.
Hours. See those. Those are those two.
Oh, yeah. No, it's good. Wait, we're good? Okay. All right, well, it is 5:30 PM. A quorum, so we're gonna go ahead and get started. So welcome. I'm Jen Burbidge, Director of Parks, Culture and Recreation for the City of Lacey, and I'm actually going to be running the meeting tonight since we don't have a chair elected yet for the board. So we're gonna do introductions here in a moment, and that'll be our way of doing roll call, so it'll be just your name for right now. But before we do that, just a quick note on why we're here. So this is the Parks Improvement Funding Work Group. It's the first meeting here tonight on August 19th for this ad hoc committee. And our purpose is to review parks expansion and replacement projects identified in the 6-year Parks Capital Improvement Program. And that's a mouthful, so we're gonna call that the PCIP moving forward. And that's to analyze available funding options as well and to make recommendations to the city council. So tonight, there's gonna be a lot of training and orientation and kind of the higher level overviews. So we won't be getting into the meat of the topics this evening. And there'll be time for questions, but we might just say, hey, we're gonna address that in one of the next meetings, just to get through our topics for tonight. So like I said, we'll have the work group members go around and introduce themselves, just your name, and we have something to get to know each other a little bit more later in the agenda. So we'll start right over here.
I'm Karen Ideker.
Lauren Howard.
Ruth Weigelt.
Good afternoon, Mark Brown.
Wendy Goodwin. Haley Ortega. Brooklyn McReynolds.
John Hagwood.
Sherry Wilkins.
Kathleen Cook.
The text is James, would call me Jim Eichner.
And then we have members on the screen, if you could introduce.
Hi, Yvette Temple.
Philip Roybal.
And Rachel Murata.
Great, and just a note that Daphne Reslaf is not attending this evening. And looking to Carter, are we missing anyone else? Great, thank you. Next, we're gonna briefly introduce the staff in the room. So I've already introduced myself. I wanted to introduce Jenny Wilson. She's our Senior Parks Planner. She's gonna be in a leadership role for this work group, and she's your official liaison for this board. Introducing Carter Gibson. He's our Executive Assistant, and he'll be providing administrative support for this group. I'll let the other staff just quickly introduce.
Shannon Kelly Fallon, I'm the Assistant City Manager.
Great, thank you so much. We are going to start off with a land acknowledgement, which I'm going to read. The Parks Improvement Funding Work Group meets on the ancestral land of the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek, including the Nisqually Indian Tribe and Squaxin Island Tribe. We acknowledge and remember those tribal people not recognized today who were absorbed or relocated into other tribes for survival. We recognize the ancestors and their descendants who are still here. We recognize and respect the tribal people of the Treaty of Medicine Creek as the traditional stewards of this land since time immemorial, and their role today in taking care of these lands in perpetuity. We recognize and have the responsibility to call attention to the histories of dispossession, forced removal, and abridged treaty rights that allowed our nation, state, and city to develop as they have today. We recommend that community members read the Medicine Creek Treaty of 1854. And next we have approval of agenda and minutes. There are no minutes, of course, because it's our first meeting, but I would like to ask for a motion to approve the agenda. A second.
For approval of the minutes, second the agenda.
Okay, so Mark Brown moved. We're gonna say names just to help our minute taker here too. And I actually didn't catch who seconded it because I think there were several. So Ruth had a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Voting member to second.
Oh,
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you.
sorry.
Thank you.
We're gonna get into that in our training.
Yes, we will. Okay, so we have Karen Ideker.
Zippo.
who Did second. It's been moved and seconded by voting members. All those in favor
Aye.
and any opposed? Great, thank you. We have public comment next on our agenda, and we have confirmed that there was no written public comment that came in. And do we have anyone who pre-registered online to provide virtual public comment? Nope. And then we looked to anyone else in the room who elected to sign up for in-person public comment. Okay. Want to acknowledge that Lori, who's on our Parks Board, is also here attending as a member of the public. When it comes to public comment, commenters will have 3 minutes each to speak, just for your information. And that goes in the order of who signed up first, and public comment period lasts for 30 minutes total. If there are commenters left after the 30 minutes, the work group may vote on whether to add additional time at the end of the agenda to resume public comment, but they are not required to. So just kind of for your information. With that, we're on to our business items. And first we have the advisory board stipend program and demographic survey.
Good evening, everyone. It's good to see you all here, and I just want to thank you for all of the work that you're going to be doing on behalf of the city throughout this work group. I'm joined here by our city clerk tonight, and we're going to be talking about an advisory board stipend program and then also a demographic survey. And then the clerk's also going to be providing some additional information on public meetings and where you can access that information. So we do have a short PowerPoint presentation for you tonight. All right, so like I mentioned, we'll talk about these items, and staff support is also going to be available. So just because we go over this once tonight, don't think you have to know it all by the end of this meeting. The clerk and I are here to help you answer any questions or navigate any systems moving forward. So we'll start with the advisory board stipend program. So really quickly, this is a project that our Commission on Equity and then the City Council approved. And I know we do have a Commission on Equity member over here. So we have John Hegwood. And so John can provide you some more insight from his perspective as we walk through this process. But the program was established to offset incurred expenses for participating on city advisory boards. So these could be things like travel, it could be internet uses, childcare. These are things that could present barriers to community members for participating on these types of work groups as well as other types of advisory boards. And so we really wanted to try to remove that barrier to participation by offering this type of stipend. So advisory board members, importantly, remain volunteers regardless of whether or not you opt in or opt out of this program. And you are not city employees, whether or not you opt in or opt out of the program. So why we did this, I talked about some barriers, and I just wanted to provide an example of what barriers can look like for different community members and what kind of resources might be necessary to attend these types of meetings. So I've put up here 3 community members, and you can see with each community member, they have a bit of a different background, and the resources it takes to get them to these meetings differs. So for community member number 1 right here, and these are generalities, right? It is a retired person, they have no children at home, and they own a vehicle. So when we're thinking about them, they might have significant discretionary time. They don't require childcare, and they can more easily access these meetings by driving here in person. So when you're talking about a 90-minute meeting, their travel time might be 20 minutes to and from. And so they're going to expend about $3 in gas, a total of 110 minutes in their own personal resources of time. And so their total cost to attend the meeting, if we don't take into account time, is about $3. If we look at community member number 3, as another example, you can see their work varies. So they're not working a 9 to 5. They've got children under the age of 10, transit user, they don't have a vehicle, and they don't have high-speed internet in their house. Their time is likely a little bit more limited when we're looking at their resources. For them to get to City Hall, it could take anywhere from 30 minutes taking a bus to get here. That could be waiting for the bus, it could be on the bus, or any combination. They've got limited internet access as well. And if they were to come in person, they're gonna be requiring to have some sort of childcare for their children who are under 10. So their meeting time is exactly the same as our community member number 1, but you can see their travel time, if they're coming in person, would be much higher. So maybe it takes them an additional hour to get here. It could also, if they are coming here in person, they might need childcare, so that could take them $50. Or maybe they're taking the meeting from home, but it requires them to get high-speed internet to be able to participate, and that could be $50. So you can see with community member number 3 here, their total time expended is about 150 minutes. And their cost, if we take into account either childcare or internet, could be around $50. So they are expending some resources to be able to participate in a meeting like this. So the program itself applies to all advisory boards here at the City of Lacey. This includes ad hoc advisory boards or task force, very much like this group, and that's why we're here today to talk about it. So participants will need to opt into this program. So we are going to be sending you a email here pretty soon. Handout. We're going to be sending you a handout here pretty soon. Thank you, Clark. Thank you, Alyssa. And you're going to be able to opt in or opt out. This is something that would happen on an annual basis if this was a reoccurring advisory board for this group. I think the idea or the intention is for it to wrap up this year. However, if it does spill into next year, this would be certainly something we'd come back to this group to have another discussion about. So anybody who opts into this program would be eligible to receive $50 per every meeting that they attend, up to $500 per a calendar year. So for the remainder of this year, and again, if it spills into next year, that count would reset, and that could go up to $500 there as well. No advisory board member can receive over $500 annually. Now, the stipends themselves will be distributed at a minimum of 4 times per year. And stipends will have to follow all relevant tax requirements. So you will have to file and fill out all of the appropriate paperwork here at the city to receive these funds. The program does not apply to regional advisory board members, council members, and city employees. And part of this process, we are piloting. This is the very first year that we've done this for the City of Lacey. And so what we have committed to the Lacey City Council is to come back on an annual basis and tell them about, the opt-in, opt-out rates. And then also to talk a little bit about the demographics of our advisory boards, which we'll get here in just a second. And as you can see, the city manager's office is helping implement this, with really the heavy lifting being done by the city clerk's office, as well as our finance department. So what to expect, and I'm gonna turn it over to the city clerk.
So thank you. And as Shannon mentioned, we are actually going to be handing out a form, and we will be distributing this form electronically to our remote attendees and those who were not able to be here this evening. But the form is just that we're asking for an opt-in or an opt-out selection by each of the members here on this body. Members who opt in, we will take that information and forward it to our finance department, who will be reaching out using their electronic platform known as PaymentWorks. So then that correspondence will be following up with you to get the necessary tax requirements to create a new account so that those stipend payments can be issued. It is a secure platform and it will collect all your preferred payment details, including that completed W-9 tax form as well. So trusted communications, this is just because we're doing a handout this way and not doing any other electronic forms. Just PaymentWorks is trusted, it is secure, and if you are opting in, please anticipate that communication would be coming shortly thereafter. So spam mailboxes and everything else, and city staff, if we don't get any confirmation received back, we will be reaching out just because finance will need that completed. Any questions on stipend program?
Yes. Alyssa, several of us serve on other city boards or commissions. I'm on the Civil Service Commission. If we've already opted out for that role, do we need to do it again specific to this?
Yes, for your role here on this body, we do ask that each member make a selection. Should you have already opted in on another advisory board, the $500 is to each individual, though. It's not for each separate board in which you serve. So does that help answer?
Thank you.
And also, just to add on to what Alyssa was saying, if we don't receive a response to, it's presumed opted out.
Correct. Any others?
Mark Brown's a voting member,
So-
correct? Carter on your list, yes.
Great question over here. Thank you, Jen, for highlighting this. So just a point of clarification. And so Jen, I don't know if you want to talk about that?
Well, my understanding is that the commission that you sit on is in a different category. So you're actually a voting member of this commission.
I'm not tracking with you, but maybe we can talk later.
Yeah.
On the Civil Service Commission, we vote.
Yep. Right, yep, but I just wanted to clarify that you are a voting member of this board, because we have other members that are, for example, Ruth's on the LTAC, and so she's a non-voting member of this board. Same with John, who is on the Commission on Equity. And so just wanted to clarify that. You are a voting member here. Yep.
Maybe just
You have
offer up
something to add to
a
that?
little bit more
Yeah.
clarification, and that is because civil service in this case is appointed by the city manager, not appointed by the city council. So it isn't, the rest of the advisory boards that are non-voting members are city council appointed, and per our city council policies and procedures, couldn't serve on multiple boards. But this is a different board in that it's a city manager board. But I do want to clarify that regardless of whether or not you are a voting or a non-voting member, that you can participate in this program. So non-voting members, you can also still participate in the advisory board stipend program.
Thank you. Great. All right, next we're touching base on our public meetings portal. So Civic Clerk is what the city uses to facilitate all of our public meetings. So this is our portal on our website that we will be using to access agendas, agenda materials, approved minutes, and then the recording that is bookmarked live during the meeting. Should you want to go back and listen or review, or if you miss any meetings. So benefits, the public meeting materials, they stay up there. They're posted. You will get notification once those materials are published for your upcoming meetings, but then they also stay there for all past meetings as well. It provides a live meeting progress for all those who are watching at home, as well as some action items that will display throughout the meeting, showing votes, displays, and all of that for the public. Also, there's great search capabilities. So if beyond this group, city council, all of our other advisory boards as well, you can do keyword searches and see everything that comes up for those meeting materials that have gone through a public meeting process in the history of all the materials. So what it looks like, if you go to our homepage here, this is thecityoflacey.org. It is the center button right there. Front and center. And by clicking that button, it will take you to this display that allows you to do a calendar view, the search capabilities up or in the top fields there, and then also it will default to the day that you select. And so today, being Monday, August 19th, we have the Parks Improvement Funding Workgroup that's highlighted for us here. Any questions on public meeting access? Okay, back over to Shannon.
So the last item we have on this topic is for the demographic survey. So like I mentioned a little bit earlier in the presentation, we want to go back to council every year and report out on our program for the advisory board stipend program. And one of that was to see if we're actually getting new voices and perspectives on our advisory boards by removing barriers. And so what we want to do on a regular basis is to do a demographic survey of who is serving on our advisory boards, and are we becoming more or less reflective of our community with these types of programs. Now, we recognize though that on an advisory board, you might be serving for 3 years, you might be serving for 4 years, you might be serving for just a moment in time, a couple of months, right? But what we want to see is over time, are we seeing changes in representation on our advisory boards? So we're using this year as kind of our foundational, just getting background of where are we right now? So that in 5 years' time, we might say, hey, did this program have an impact? Or do we need to take a look at other ways that we need to do outreach and engagement to community members? So we're collecting this information, as it states up here, to identify missing perspectives and to improve outreach and engagement efforts. The information provided through these surveys is going to be saved separately from any personally identifiable information, so there will be no names associated with it. The one caveat that I'd like to say is that there are 15 members here. And so there isn't a huge data set, so individuals could be taking a look at it and go, okay, I'm making some guesses here. But we do want to keep them aggregated, and so we want to present them at a high level and use this information for the purposes of improving our outreach in the future. So the questions that are asked include age, racial identity, ethnic identity, languages spoken, disability, annual income, home ownership, gender identity, sexual orientation, highest level of education, and veteran status. And importantly, all of these are optional. You can fill out what you want to fill out. You don't need to fill out everything. Any questions about the demographic survey? Fantastic. Well, thank you.
And we will have some QR codes that will be available after the meeting for you all to take the demographic survey. We'll also be sending a link to remote participants. If you use one of our loaner devices or your own personal device, it still comes up as anonymous. It's aggregate information, so it's just more kind of your preference. I only brought 4 loaner iPads just because there are more of you than I have iPads. But that will be available at the end of the meeting.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely can walk that over.
So this is item 6B of our agenda.
Making sure we have. We're gonna do a little navigating while I get the slides pulled up. Right. Oh, there we go. Thank you. All right. Sharing my screen, and we get to dive into open public meetings and open public records act. So to start us off, the Attorney General's office does prepare 3 lessons that are required for our elected officials and appointed members to advisory boards and staff members for public records training. So we are going to use the Attorney General's office's slides that does not have any automated video along with it. We're gonna walk through it together, and then ultimately have 2 subsequent videos that we're gonna cover, and you'll get certificates at the end of this, and we are in compliance, and we get to learn a lot of cool things together. There we go. All right. So Open Government Trainings Act was enacted in 2014. So we're in a little bit of history here. And it requires local statewide officials and records officers to complete the required training. So kind of what I've mentioned, 90 days after appointment, and then in 4-year intervals at the very least. So we try to do it as often as possible, but definitely making sure that we get it as soon as people are appointed in scenarios such as this. And so here we have some prominent names that touch on the principles behind maintaining open government. And so what we're going to dive into today. So open government laws are often called transparency laws or sunshine laws. So the whole scope of this being transparency builds public confidence in government. So, and as US Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis once famously said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. So they've got that highlighted here for us. So we're gonna be covering two different statutes today, a lot of acronyms, but the Open Public Records Act is the act that covers disclosure, the records in which we create, use, maintain and retain for government business. And then we are also touching on the Open Public Meetings Act that touches on all of our open meetings here that this body will participate in. All right, so the intent of the Public Records Act really is free and open examination of public records for public interest. Even though such examination may cause inconvenience or embarrassment to public officials. Similarly, the Open Public Meetings Act ultimately is to set requirements for meetings to remain open with requirements covering items such as accessibility and noticing. So giving more to that transparency for the public and the community. Both statutes do allow for specific exemptions, but they are limited by the authorities that govern them. So for example, specific information may be withheld from disclosure, such as a social security number or anything else that is protected by law, as well as in a public meeting. There are specific topics that can be discussed in a closed session, such as real estate and or litigation or pending litigation. A little bit more on history. The Open Public Records Act was passed in 1972. It is now covered under the statute 4256. This applies to all public agencies, state and local. It does not apply to courts. They do have their own statute that they operate under. However, court records, should they find themselves here in a local municipality, they would be released under the Public Records Act. That is what we respond under. There's limited application to legislature and really public records are defined to include writings, but this is a very vast definition and covers, like I said, anything and everything that goes to the conduct of business. Records are open unless there is an exemption authorized by law. So just kind of touching back on that specific scenario where if we have a legal authority to protect it, we can, but not beyond that. For the public meetings, the OPMA passed in 1971 and covers the requirements under that for multi-member public agency boards, commission governing bodies and their committees. This also does not apply to courts and it does not apply to the legislature. So just another recap that public records are always to be presumed open. The PRA is to be liberally construed. And records or information in records can only be withheld only by law. Same thing for public meetings. They are presumed open and to be liberally construed. Meetings or parts of meetings can be closed only by law. So those are those executive sessions and a statute authority must be cited for those. So the PRA and agency policies cover a lot of details on how to respond to a request. Really for this body and this training, I do want to emphasize this education does expand to creating records. And when we are, writing things down and the scope of the body that you serve on, creating those records with the knowing the intent of the laws that govern the records in which you create. So. Going back to the scope, the PRA for public records applies to any writing containing information relating to the conduct of government or the performance of any government or proprietary function prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of physical form or characteristics. So like I said, the definition in the statute is pretty expansive. It does include things like overheads, microfiche, and photographs, but also it extends beyond that to emails, text messages, voicemails, anything really that we're using in technology today. So the public meetings applies, like we mentioned, to multi-member public, state, and local agencies. I'm not going to cover all of this, but where it applies here is any sub-agency of a public agency which is created by or pursuant to statute, ordinance, or other legislative act. So this is including but not limited to planning commissions, library or parks boards, commissions, ad hoc work groups. So withholding records or closing meetings, there's a lot of violation that if this occurs, there are penalties that can follow. Withholding a public record or information in a public record, it must be authorized by law. Only the exempt information can be withheld. So just because a document contains sensitive information doesn't mean the whole document gets withheld. And the agency must cite the basis and give a brief explanation. So all of this is done by designated public record staff here at the city. So should any community member reach out to any one of you and seek a document, definitely loop in your staff liaison right away and we can get it all taken care of. Public meetings, again, we are covering everything that we need to, that's required by statute. We do our noticing, publishing of agendas. Closing a meeting or part of a meeting subject to the OPMA must be authorized by law, and we have set requirements for our staff to be able to properly notice this so that the public has an opportunity. Enforcement and penalties. So the Public Records Act is enforced by the courts. The court can impose statutory penalties to be awarded to a requester for any violation found. The court will also order payment of requester's attorney fees and costs in some situations. The court can also order disclosure of all or part of a withheld record, or non-disclosure of part of all of a record. Enforcement and penalties under the open public meetings is also enforced by the courts and can impose a $500 civil penalty against any member of the body in which a violation is found. Again, this is just by staff. We're taking care of everything so that none of this comes into play. Risk management tips. So for public records and open public meetings, a big part of this is compliance. It's also training, it's education, it's showing that we sit down with you all, newly appointed members, newly oriented staff that come in, and we train them on what it is to work for a public agency or serve on a body. And so establishing a culture of compliance with the PRA begins with leadership and support. We have procedures, resources, institute best practices, and then updating developments and then correctly applying the law. We also have our legal counsel that we can reach out to. And so kind of just checking off everything that we do on a routine basis, including training such as this. So for the Open Public Records Act, the Attorney General's office has appointed the Assistant Attorney General for Open Government to provide information about the PRA, which is why these slides are here for us today and some of the subsequent videos that we'll be listening to. There's model rules, technical assistance and training, resources material, and plenty of things that we can access should we need any further assistance in guiding us with questions. This applies to the Open Public Meetings Act as well, so that's why they're hand in hand right now. That covers it for lesson 1 from the Attorney General's office. It's a lot of words, a lot of information. Really, it's more so just wanting to reinforce that you all get to be here in a work group and serve the community, and everything that you guys prepare and create is a public record, and we are here to help you and facilitate and just remind everybody that just putting that best foot forward and no expectations of privacy when we serve in these roles. Are there any questions? Okay. We're gonna do. So before this gets started, this is a 30-minute recording from our Attorney General's office. And so then after this one, it's about 18 minutes. So once these conclude, we will get to sign off on your certificates and we will file those for our compliance and keep track of those and be on our way.
Hi, I'm Bob Ferguson, your Attorney General. With me in this video is the Open Government Assistant Attorney General, Nancy Creer. This training video provides a basic overview of our Public Records Act for both records requesters and state and local agencies. It's intended to provide greater understanding of the legal requirements around the act. The Public Records Act is a law created by an initiative vote of the people in 1972, which provides the public access to the records of government agencies. It received 72% of the vote. The purpose of the act is to provide the public full access to information concerning the conduct of government, mindful of individuals' privacy rights, and fulfill the desire for the efficient administration of government. The law is based on the principle that open government is essential to a free society. All state and local agencies must comply with the Public Records Act. All public records must be disclosed unless a law exempts records or information. There are well over several hundred exemptions. Some of those exemptions are listed in the Act, but many exist in other state and federal laws. The Act is a broad mandate interpreted in favor of disclosure, and its exemptions are narrowly construed.
This training presentation is based on the Public Records Act and the Attorney General's Advisory Model Rules. The rules are online at the Attorney General's website at www.atg.wa.gov. They provide examples of steps to comply with the Public Records Act. An agency may adopt any part of the model rules into its own rules. Local agencies should consult the model rules when establishing local Public Records Act ordinances. The model rules provide comments that are useful for interpreting the Public Records Act and for training agency personnel. The model rules are non-binding, but they are based on extensive outreach, court decisions, and have been cited favorably in some court cases. This training video was prepared in the fall of 2017. The model rules were being updated in 2017. The legislature also amended the Public Records Act in 2017, and the legislature can amend it again in the future. The courts can also interpret the Act. Consequently, and as a reminder, there may be developments in the law after this video is prepared. Several updates on the law are often posted in materials on the Attorney General's Office website on the Open Government Training page. A PowerPoint on that page also provides training on the Public Records Act. This training video contains 16 short segments where we will review history, purpose, and intent of the Public Records Act, scope of the PRA, general obligations of an agency, what is a public record, requests for records, initial agency responses, reasonable estimates, adequate searches, disclosure, electronic records, managing broad requests, exemptions and withholding, fees, other records provisions, liability, and finally, additional resources. You have just heard from the Attorney General about the history, purpose, and intent of the Act. The Act regulates the disclosure of public records. The Act requires disclosure of public records unless a law permits withholding of a record or part of a record. The Act has many components, and compliance requires training. Training can be the difference between a satisfied requester and expensive litigation. The Act applies to both state and local agencies. A state agency includes every state office, department, division, bureau, board, and commission. A local agency includes every county, city, town, municipal corporation, special purpose district, and other forms of local government. In some cases, an entity which is not an agency can still be subject to the Act when it is the functional equivalent of an agency. This determination depends on whether it performs a government function, receives government funding, the extent of government involvement or regulation, and whether the entity was created by government. Courts are not subject to the Act. Agencies must appoint a public records officer responsible for being a point of contact for the public and for overseeing compliance. The name and contact information of the public records officer should be published with information on how to submit requests for records. The public records officer must have received training on the Act within 90 days of assuming his or her duties. Agencies must also publish information on the agency organization, rules, and procedures in an index of specific categories of records. Agencies are required to adopt reasonable rules to provide full public access to public records, to protect public records from damage or disorganization, to prevent excessive interference with other essential functions of the agency, and to provide the fullest assistance to inquirers. Agencies may wish to consult with their attorneys when developing their rules and procedures. A public record is any writing relating to the conduct of government which is prepared, owned, used, or retained by any state or local agency, regardless of physical form or characteristics. It could be an email, text message, paper, letter, or memo, an audio or video recording, a picture, image, map, or any recording of information or data compilation from which information may be obtained or translated. A public record is not just what an agency creates, but includes documents created by citizens or private companies that are used or received by a government for a governmental purpose. A public record may also include documents not possessed by the agency, but which were used by the agency. For example, the courts have described that work documents on the personal computer, personal cell phone, or personal email account of an agency employee or official are subject to a request under the Public Records Act. Records of certain volunteers are excluded from the definition of public record. Records are excluded when they are not otherwise required to be retained and are held by volunteers who do not serve in an administrative capacity, have not been appointed by the agency to an agency board, commission, or internship, and do not have a supervisory role or delegated agency authority. Any person wishing to inspect or copy public records of an agency should submit the request to the agency, preferably in writing, using the agency's request form. The Public Records Act doesn't prescribe any official format for a valid request, so an agency must honor valid requests for identifiable records regardless of the format of the request. While using an agency's form is not required, it is typically the most efficient way to submit a request. A requester who chooses not to use an agency form must give the agency fair notice that he or she is submitting a request for public records. Agencies are required to honor requests received in person during an agency's normal office hours or by email. If an agency has adopted reasonable rules on how requests should be submitted, the agency may rely on those rules. The agency should be helpful to the requester in explaining how a request should be submitted and to whom. Records shall be available for inspection and copying upon request for identifiable records. So requesters should give a reasonable description of the records, enabling the agency to search for potentially responsive records. A request for all or substantially all of an agency's records is not a proper request for identifiable records. A request regarding a particular topic or containing a particular keyword or name shall not be considered a request for all of an agency's records. A request for information is not the same as a request for public records. The Public Records Act does not apply to requests for information. There is no duty to create a record that does not exist in order to fulfill a request for records or information. However, requests for information are at times easier to fulfill. Fulfilling a request for information may avert a large public records request. An agency must promptly respond to public records requests. Within 5 business days of receiving a request, an agency must respond. An initial response may be any one of the following: acknowledging receipt of the request and providing a reasonable estimate to respond, or fulfilling the request, or providing an internet address and link to the records on the agency's website, or seeking clarification while also, to the greatest extent possible, providing an estimate of time for further response if the request is not clarified, or denying the request with an accompanying written statement of the specific reasons. Reasonably clear requests for identifiable records may require no clarification. However, some requests are unclear. Seeking clarification permits the agency to identify responsive records, which in turn will aid in determining the scope of the request. Clarifying a request provides the fullest assistance to the requester so that the requester receives and pays for only those copies that are desired. Clarification may also result in prompt disclosure by identifying only those records desired. An agency should not seek clarification if the request is for identifiable records and is reasonably clear. If the entire response is unclear and the requester fails to respond to the agency's request for clarification, the agency need not respond to it. However, the agency must respond to those portions of a request that are clear. An agency may deny a bot request, which is a request that was automatically generated by a computer program or script when it is one of multiple requests from the requester received within a 24-hour period. The agency must establish that responding to the bot request would cause excessive interference with other essential agency functions. A requester is typically not required to provide the reason for a request unless a law necessitates additional information from the requester. Agencies and requesters are encouraged to promptly communicate with each other if there are issues regarding a request. An agency's initial response to a public records request must provide a reasonable estimate for the time to respond when more time is needed. A reasonable estimate should account for many factors, including the time to have the requester clarify the request if needed, as well as time to assemble and review the records, provide notice to affected persons or agencies if needed, to redact exempt information, and to create a withholding or exemption log. An agency should not use the same estimate for every request. Rather, each reasonable estimate should be based on factors such as the complexity of the request, other pending requests, agency resources, and other agency essential functions. It's a good practice for an agency to briefly explain to the requester the basis for the estimate in the initial response. Extending the estimate is appropriate when circumstances have changed or additional information has come to light. Agencies are encouraged to briefly explain the need to revise an estimate. An agency bears the burden of showing that its search was adequate. Consequently, agencies should be able to document how a search was conducted and, for example, what search terms it used, as well as the location searched. An adequate search depends on the facts of each request, but it is one that is reasonably calculated to uncover all responsive documents in whatever form, paper or electronic. An agency must make more than a perfunctory search and follow obvious leads as they are uncovered. The search should not be limited to one or more locations if there are additional places where responsive records are likely to be found. If responsive public records are likely to be found on or in an agency employee's or official's personal device or account, the employee or official must search those devices and accounts for responsive records. It is possible to conduct an adequate search and still not locate a responsive document. However, if a responsive record is not located and or if challenged in court, the agency will have to prove its search was adequate. An agency must make records available during its customary office hours for a minimum of 30 hours per week. Public records are presumed to be open for inspection and copying unless a specific law exempts the record or information from disclosure. Agencies can deliver copies of records to a requester in a number of ways, such as providing links to the records that are on the agency's website, providing paper copies of paper records or scanned copies of paper records by mail or making them available for pickup, or providing electronic records by various methods. You may recall that with respect to what is a public record, the Public Records Act does not distinguish between paper and electronic records. Most agencies create records in an electronic format. A copy of an electronic record should be produced in the requested electronic format if reasonably feasible. Translating a record into an alternative electronic format at the request of the requester, or scanning a paper record, is not creating a new record. Metadata is information embedded in a document that provides detail about the document's characteristics. This may include information such as when the document was created, edited, recipients, and so forth. Non-exempt metadata must be disclosed when expressly requested. When agencies obtain new technologies, they should consider not only the agency's business operation needs, but also records retention and disclosure requirements. Examples of such technologies are portals through which records can be requested and delivered, electronic redaction tools, or retention software, just to name a few. In addition, agencies can look at whether they could make use of their current technology more robust. The legislature encourages agencies to make public records widely available electronically, particularly commonly requested records. For example, an agency could make commonly requested records available on its website. Then, as noted earlier, an agency could fulfill its obligation to provide access to a public record by providing a requester with a link to a specific agency webpage containing the electronic copy of the requested record. For requesters without access to the internet, an agency could provide a computer terminal at its office. Agencies should develop policies addressing technology concerns, such as if and when agency employees may use personal devices for public agency uses, and what responsibilities and requirements therefore attach to the employee. An agency may receive a broad request that asks for any and all records related to a topic. Agencies may not deny a request solely because it is overly broad. As noted, a request for all or substantially all of an agency's records is not a valid request. But a request for all records regarding a particular topic or containing a particular keyword or name is not a request for all of an agency's records. After an initial search shows there are potentially hundreds or thousands of different types of responsive or potentially responsive records, a public records officer should contact the requester to explain the estimated total number of records that would need to be searched, or provide other information describing the anticipated scope of the search. Then the agency could seek clarification to ask if the requester wants all of the different types of responsive records and is willing to pay for all the copies, or instead, if the requester is seeking only some of the records. Good communication can assist both the agency and the requester. A broad request will usually result in a longer estimate of time for disclosure, as well as producing records in batches or installments. When seeking clarification, to the greatest extent possible, the agency must provide a reasonable estimate of time the agency will require to respond to the request if it is not clarified. In many instances, a requester will narrow the scope of the request to enable the agency to provide disclosure more promptly and less expensively. An agency may manage broad requests in a couple ways. An agency may require a deposit in an amount not to exceed 10% of the estimated cost of providing copies for a request. If an agency makes copies in response to a request available on a partial or installment basis, the agency may charge for each part of the request as it is provided. If an installment of a records request is not claimed or reviewed, the agency is not obligated to fulfill the balance of the request. Finally, use of electronic technologies to search, review, redact, and disclose public records can reduce overall costs of compliance for agencies. Agency responses denying in whole or in part inspection or copy of any public record shall include a statement of the specific exemption authorizing the withholding of the record and a brief explanation of how the exemption applies. Exemptions exist throughout the Public Records Act and other state and federal laws. Common exemptions include information such as personal information in files maintained for agency employees, if private, pending investigative files compiled by law enforcement or agencies with authority to discipline members of a profession, the non-disclosure of which is essential to effective law enforcement or for the protection of any person's right to privacy, educational records of students in public schools, attorney-client privilege information or work product related to litigation, or protected healthcare information. There is no statute providing a general privacy exemption. If privacy is an express element of a specific exemption, it is only invaded if disclosure would be both highly offensive to the reasonable person and also not of legitimate concern to the public. Exemptions in the Act must be construed narrowly. The general rule is that an agency redacts or withholds only the exempt information and produces the non-exempt information. An acceptable way of providing this information to the requester is with a withholding index, often called an exemption log. The information provided as part of the log should include a description of the type of record or part of record denied. The description should include identifying information from the document. For example, whether the document is a letter or email, the date the document was created or other relevant date, the total number of pages, and the sender and recipients. The exemption log must also include the statutory authority making the information exempt and a brief explanation of how the exemption applies. Some of this information will be evident on the face of the document where redactions have been made to only part of the document. An exemption log, the written explanation, also may be provided in different formats. For example, may be handwritten or compiled in a spreadsheet or chart, or in a letter, or redactions are marked on the records with exemption codes, and the requester is given the key to the codes. The format of the exemption log or exemptions is not relevant so long as the required information is provided. Any person may inspect non-exempt public records for free. An agency may not charge for the time of staff to search, review, or redact public records when preparing them for inspection. If a requester wants copies of records, an agency has options to charge for copies. It can charge actual costs, or it can charge default fees listed in the Public Records Act, or it can charge an alternative up to $2 fee for an entire request. Some other provisions may be relevant too. In order to charge actual costs, an agency must make available for public inspection and copying a statement of the actual per page or other costs and how it determined actual costs. An agency may adopt its statement of actual costs only after providing notice and a public hearing. When calculating fees, the agency must use the most reasonable, cost-efficient method available to the agency. Staff time to copy and deliver the requested public records may be included in an agency's costs, but an agency may not include staff salaries, benefits, or other general administrative or overhead charges unless those costs are directly related to the actual cost of copying the public records. An example of when an agency may want to charge for the actual costs of staff time is where an agency scans paper records and copies them into an electronic format. The charges should be reasonable and related to the wage of the person likely to be repeatedly assigned to this task. If an agency does not have staff available to make copies, for non-exempt records, an agency may send a scanning or copying project to an outside vendor and pass on the actual cost to the requester. Electronic copy costs may include the actual cost of the electronic production or file transfer of the record, the use of any cloud-based data storage processing service, and the cost of transmitting electronic records, including the use of a physical media device. A second method to charge copy costs is for an agency to choose to use a statutory default fee schedule provided in the Act. In that case, an agency need not calculate actual costs if it has rules or regulations declaring the reasons doing so would be unduly burdensome. The statutory default fee schedule lists, for example, per page costs for paper records, scanned records, and costs for electronic records. As yet another alternative, an agency can assess an up to $2 flat fee for an entire request when certain conditions are met. The Act includes other fee provisions. For example, an agency cannot charge for access to or downloading of records it routinely posts on its website prior to the receipt of a request, unless the requester is specifically asked that the agency provide records through other means. An agency may impose the actual cost of a customized service charge when the request would require the use of IT expertise to prepare data compilations, or when such customized access services are not used by the agency for other business purposes. The agency must notify the requester and take other steps if it chooses to do a customized service. An agency can require an advance 10% deposit before making copies. An agency may enter into a contract, memorandum of understanding, or other agreement with a requester for an alternative fee arrangement, or in response to an extensive or frequently occurring request. An agency may choose to waive any charge pursuant to agency rules and regulations. Upon request, an agency must provide a summary of the applicable charges before making copies. The requester then may choose to revise the request, reduce the number of copies, and the cost. In sum, the Public Records Act provides an agency several options for assessing charges for copies. The choices selected may vary from agency to agency. Under a different law, the records retention laws at RCW 40.14, agencies must maintain a log of public records requests, including for each request, the identity of the requester if provided, date of receipt, text of request, description of records produced, description of records redacted or withheld and the reasons for doing so, and the date of final disposition. With respect to the identity of the requester, it is possible an agency received only an email address from the requester, and if so, that address would be included in the log. The logs must be retained per the agency's records retention schedule and are a public record. The records retention law also provides that agencies spending at least $100,000 to fulfill requests during the prior fiscal year must report 17 data points about their PRA requests to the Joint Legislative Audit and Review Committee. Under the Public Records Act, any person having been denied an opportunity to inspect or copy a public record may seek further review in the agency. The person may also file a lawsuit to enforce his or her right to access public records. A requester can also file a lawsuit if he or she believes that an agency has not made a reasonable estimate of the time or of the charges to provide public records. Such a lawsuit is to be filed in a court within 1 year of an agency's final definitive response to a request, such as a final claim of exemption or the last production of public records on an installment basis. The agency has the burden of proof to demonstrate that public records were lawfully denied or its estimates were reasonable. If it does not make this showing, an agency will pay the requester's reasonable attorney's fees and costs and may pay potential penalties for denying records in violation of the Public Records Act. A court will consider mitigating and aggravating factors in determining a penalty amount. Lawsuits for public records can be extremely time-consuming and expensive for agencies. Understanding and correctly applying the law is a good risk management tool for state and local government. In rare cases, individual employees may also be civilly or criminally liable under other laws. State agency employees and state officers are subject to the Ethics in Public Service Act. It is a violation of that state ethics law for a state employee or officer to intentionally conceal a public record required to be released under the Public Records Act. State agency employees and officers may be fined up to $5,000 per violation of the state ethics law. It's also a crime for any agency officer to willfully mutilate, destroy, conceal, erase, obliterate, or falsify any record of that agency's office, except where the law expressly authorizes the non-disclosure or destruction of records. The crime is punishable by imprisonment of up to 10 years or a fine of up to $5,000 or both.
Thank you for participating in the Attorney General's open government training. For more information, there are available resources for agencies to receive training and technical assistance for compliance with the Public Records Act. An employee should first consult with its agency's public records officer for routine assistance or training. Additional resources are listed on this website. The Assistant Attorney General for Open Government is also available to provide information about the Public Records Act. Thanks again for watching.
Any questions? What was that?
No quiz?
No quiz, I'm not quizzing you. We've got one more. Thank you all for your patience. Last one of the evening.
Stand up at any time, that's good. No, I have to.
Hello, I'm Assistant Attorney General Morgan Dammer. This training provides an overview of the Open Public Meetings Act. It's intended for both the public and public agencies. Our purpose in this training is to provide a greater understanding of the legal requirements of the Open Public Meetings Act. The Act was passed in 1971, a time of a nationwide effort to make government affairs more accessible and more responsive. The purpose of the Act is to provide the public access to information concerning the conduct of state and local government. The law is based on the principle that open government is essential to our free society. The Open Public Meetings Act gives the people of Washington State the opportunity to witness the deliberations and decisions of government. More recently, that's included an opportunity to provide public comment as part of that process. Multi-member governing bodies of state and local agencies such as school boards, city and county councils, and the state commission must comply with the Open Public Meetings Act. The law states that it is intended that the actions of these governing bodies be taken openly and that their deliberations be conducted in an open manner. Meetings subject to the Act must be open to the public, gavel to gavel, unless the law permits a meeting or part of that meeting to be closed. Thank you for watching, and I hope you find this training informative. This training's purpose is to increase your knowledge of the Open Public Meetings Act. The OPMA is in Chapter 4230 of the RCWs, and this training incorporates updates from the 2022 legislative session. This training video contains 15 short segments. We just discussed Section 1, the history, and Section 2, the purpose of the Act. The remaining segments we will review the scope of the OPMA, what is a governing body, what is a meeting, what is action and final action, travel and gathering, regular meetings, special meetings, remote meetings. We'll also talk about executive sessions, public attendance and comment, minutes, liability, as well as other laws and provide some additional resources to assist you. The Act has several clear requirements, and compliance with them is improved with training. Training can mean the difference between meeting your agency's OPMA obligations and expensive litigation. The Act applies to governing bodies of multi-member public agencies, both state and local. At the state level, public agency includes state boards, commissions, committees, departments, educational institutions, or other state agencies which is created by or pursuant to statute. Public agency does not include the courts or the legislature. For local governments, public agency includes any county, city, school district, special purpose district, or other municipal corporation or political subdivision of the state of Washington. Examples of these include city councils, county councils, school boards, and fire district boards. Public agency may also include a sub-agency of a public agency which is created by or pursuant to statute, ordinance, or other legislative act. A good example of these includes planning commissions, library or park boards, or commissions. A final group is any policy group whose membership includes representatives of publicly owned utilities formed or pursuant to Washington laws when meeting together or as or on behalf of participants who have contracted for the output of generating plants being planned or built by an agency operating them. In some cases, an entity which is not an agency may still be subject to the OPMA when it is the functional equivalent of a public agency. This determination depends on whether it performs a governmental function, receives governmental funding, the extent of governmental involvement or regulation, and whether the entity was created by government. Some activities of public agencies are not subject to the OPMA. They include certain licensing and permitting activities, quasi-judicial matters, matters governed by the Washington State Administrative Procedures Act, and certain collective bargaining activities. All meetings of the governing body of a public agency shall be open, and the public and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the governing body of the public agency, except as otherwise provided in the OPMA, such as during a declared emergency. The governing body is defined as a multi-member board, commission, committee, council, or other policy or rulemaking body of a public agency, or any committee thereof, when the committee acts on behalf of the governing body, conducts hearings, takes testimony, or public comment. Agencies governed by an individual, such as a single director, are not subject to the OPMA. Meeting means meetings at which action is taken. Physical presence of the members is not required. A meeting can occur by phone or in some cases by email. I'll talk more about email exchanges later in this training. A meeting does not need to be titled meeting. The OPMA also applies to retreats, workshops, and study sessions. In order for there to be a meeting, there must be a quorum of the governing body. A meeting does not occur if there is no quorum. We've talked about the fact that the OPMA applies to a governing body at a meeting. In order to qualify as a meeting, the governing body must take action. Action means the transaction of the official business of a public agency by a governing body, including but not limited to receipt of public testimony, deliberations, discussions, considerations, reviews, evaluations, and final action. A subset of action is final action. Final action means a collective positive or negative decision or any actual vote by a majority of the members of a governing body when sitting as a body or an entity upon a motion, proposal, resolution, order, or ordinance. Final actions must occur in public. Secret ballots are not allowed. A majority of the members of a governing body may travel together or gather for purposes other than regular meetings or special meetings, so long as no action is taken. And remember, action includes discussion of agency business. This means a quorum of members can travel to a meeting together, or they can gather at a public or private event, such as a festival or social function, so long as they do not collectively discuss agency business or matters. In the next segment, we are going to talk about the types of meetings where a governing body may meet. The first is regular meetings. Regular meetings are recurring meetings held in accordance with a periodic schedule by ordinance, resolution, bylaws, or other rule. State agencies file these notices of regular meetings each year with the Office of the Code Reviser. Regular meeting agendas are to be posted online on an agency's website 24 hours in advance. A special purpose district or city or town is not required to post an agenda online if the agency has an aggregate valuation of property in the taxation district of less than 400 million, a population of less than 3,000, and provides confirmation to the state auditor when filing its annual report that the cost of posting notices to a website would exceed 0.1% of the agency's budgets. These provisions exempting very small agencies changed in 2022. Certain notice requirements are required for special meetings. These include written notice 24 hours in advance of the meeting, provided to members of the governing body unless waived. The notice must be provided to local newspapers, radio, and TV stations that have a request on file with the agency. The notice must also be posted on the agency's website if it has a website. There is an exception for very small agencies, agencies with no FTEs or with no one whose job responsibilities, either by job description or by contract, with the responsibility to maintain or update the agency's website. The notice must be prominently displayed at the main entrance site and the meeting site unless the meeting is being held as a remote meeting or one where some or all members of the public are limited due to a declared emergency. The remote meeting provisions are new and we'll be addressing those in just a moment. The notice must specify the time, place, and business to be transacted. Unlike regular meetings, where the agenda may be changed and final action taken on a matter which was added to the agenda, under special meetings provisions, the governing body is prohibited from taking final action on any issue not on the original notice. There is an exception to the notice requirement for emergency special meetings. Those are meetings involving injury or damage to persons or property, or the likelihood of injury or damage, where time requirements make notice impractical and increase the likelihood of injury or damage. New in the OPMA through the 2022 amendments are provisions addressing a governing body holding remote meetings. After the declaration of emergency by a local or state government or agency or by the federal government, and the agency determines that it cannot hold a meeting of the governing body with members of the public in attendance with reasonable safety, the agency may either hold an all remote meeting without a physical location or hold a meeting with the governing body present, but some or all of the public excluded. In either of these instances, the agency must provide an option for the public to listen telephonically or by using a readily available alternate means in real time, such as an available television cable broadcast or the internet. Any option selected may not require any additional costs to access the program. If the agency does not provide an option, the agency is prohibited from taking action except for an executive session as authorized under the OPMA. If your agency is holding an all-remote meeting with some or all of the public excluded, the notice of the meeting must include instructions on how the public may listen live to the meeting. An agency that held some of its regular meetings remotely prior to March 1st of 2020 may continue to do so with no declared emergency, so long as the agency provides an option for the public to listen as required for emergency remote meetings. Up to now, we've been talking about all the requirements to ensure openness and transparency. Under the OPMA, there are enumerated instances where the governing body may convene outside of the public's view in executive session, or if the governing body is discussing matters not subject to the OPMA. An executive session may occur as part of a regular or special meeting. The grounds for holding an executive session are limited to the purposes listed in the OPMA and are narrowly construed. The purpose of the executive session and the time it will end must be publicly announced before excluding the public, and the time can be extended by further announcement. Examples of purposes include certain real estate transaction discussions, reviewing negotiations on publicly bid contracts, evaluating the qualifications of an applicant for public employment, and meeting with legal counsel regarding enforcement actions, litigation, or potential litigation. The OPMA provides a list of authorized executive session purposes at RCW 4230-110. An agency must carefully follow the law when meeting in an executive session. For example, when meeting in an executive session under the OPMA to discuss agency enforcement actions, litigation, or potential litigation, there are 3 requirements. First, legal counsel representing the agency must be present. Second, the purpose is to discuss an agency enforcement action, litigation, or potential litigation to which the agency, governing body, or a member acting in official capacity is a party or is likely to become a party. And finally, public knowledge regarding the discussion is likely to result in an adverse legal or financial consequence to the agency. Remember, an agency can discuss only those matters in an executive session under the OPMA that it has told the public it would discuss. The members cannot talk about other topics in that executive session. In addition to an executive session, a public agency can have a closed meeting to discuss matters not subject to the OPMA, such as deliberating on a quasi-judicial matter or collective bargaining. Other laws may provide additional procedures or authority for particular meetings or hearings to be closed to the public. There may be additional laws for particular agencies as well. As we discussed, all meetings of the governing body of a public agency shall be open and public, and all persons shall be permitted to attend any meeting of the governing body of a public agency, except as otherwise provided in the OPMA. An agency also cannot place conditions on attendance, such as requiring persons to register their names or fill out a questionnaire before attending. This provision does not prohibit any generally applicable condition determined by the governing body to be reasonably necessary to protect public health or safety, or to protect against interruption of the meeting, including a meeting at which the physical attendance by some or all members of the public is limited due to a declared emergency. As noted, email or phone call discussions amongst members of a governing body can be a meeting under the OPMA. But the purpose of the OPMA is to permit the public to attend and observe agency meetings. So when the public is unable to attend email or phone call discussions that are meetings under the OPMA, the act has been violated. Recent amendments to the OPMA make it clear members of a governing body can participate in meetings remotely with no declared emergency. However, public attendance must be maintained. In doing so, it is generally agreed that public notice procedures must be satisfied, and the agency has to set up a process for the public to attend, such as a speakerphone available at the agency's official meeting location, so the public can hear the discussion. In contrast, since an email exchange amongst a quorum of the members of a governing body is not open to the public, such an exchange in which an action is taken is a meeting that would violate the OPMA. And remember, action is broadly defined. It is very difficult to envision a way in which those email exchanges comply with public notice or attendance requirements for a regular or special meeting. One of the 2022 changes to the OPMA is a requirement that public agencies receive public comment at or before every regular meeting at which final action is taken. The 2022 amendments allow agencies to accept public comment either by written format or orally. If the governing body chooses written public comment, it can be submitted before or at the meeting. Any written comment received must be distributed to the governing body. The governing body may set reasonable deadline for submission prior to the meeting. The oral comment option is very similar to what many agencies were doing voluntarily before the 2022 amendments. Agencies can put reasonable procedures in place to allow for public comment. This may include limits to the time available for public comment or limit comment to those topics on the agenda. However, a governing body may also choose to accept public comment on any topic. If oral public comment is taken by the governing body, it shall, when feasible, provide an option for remote public comment for individuals that have difficulty attending. Difficulty attending may be due to a disability, limited mobility, or for any other reason that makes physical attendance difficult. A governing body is not required to accept public comment that renders orderly conduct of the meeting unfeasible. The OPMA has procedures for dealing with disruptions where orderly conduct of the meeting is unfeasible. The minutes of all regular and special meetings, except executive sessions of such boards, commissions, agencies, or authorities, shall be promptly recorded, and such records shall be open for public inspection. The OPMA does not require an audio or video recording of the meeting. Many agencies choose to do so. Public agencies are encouraged through the 2022 amendments to make audio or video recordings of meetings or to provide an online streaming option of all regular meetings of the governing body, and to make any recordings that the agency does make available online for a minimum of 6 months. Violations of the OPMA can result in a lawsuit against an agency and its members. A court can impose a $500 civil penalty as personal liability against each member who knowingly violates the OPMA, and a $1,000 penalty for a subsequent knowing violation. A court can also declare any action taken at a meeting not held in compliance with the OPMA null and void. And a court will award costs and attorney's fees to a successful party seeking a remedy under the OPMA. To recap, this presentation covers the highlights of the OPMA. Public agencies may be subject to other laws governing other particular meetings, hearings, procedures. Some agencies have particular laws that govern their meetings as well. Like the OPMA, the laws concerning agency meetings and hearings can also be amended from time to time. Therefore, agencies are cautioned to be mindful of all current laws concerning their meeting and hearing procedures. Thank you for watching the Attorney General's OPMA training. For more information, there are available resources for agencies to receive training and technical assistance for compliance with the Open Public Meetings Act. An official should first consult with his agency's counsel for routine assistance and training. Additional resources are listed on this website. The Assistant Attorney General for Open Government is also available to provide information about the Open Public Meetings Act.
Final time, any questions? All right, well, thank you, everybody, for sitting in through that. We will have certificates that will be handed out through at the end of the meeting, just for you all to sign that are here in attendance today physically, and then we will connect with those who attended remotely so that we can get this checked off our requirements and compliance list, as well as the advisory boards that have been handed out that you can all fill out and return to staff as well.
Great.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa.
Yes.
So moving on to 6C is the work group member introductions with Jenny Wilson.
Thank you so much. And Alyssa, thank you so much for all that you do, in case we don't tell you enough. I'm very appreciative of all the regulations you keep track of. So if we could just go around the room and have everybody take about a minute and just tell us what your favorite thing about Lacey Parks is and why you decided to join this advisory group. Okay, so we'll start with Erin, and then we'll go through the.
I'm so prepared for this.
Well, sorry, the first one is always the first, I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Actually, in the overall, I'm really interested in parks for so many reasons. My particular involvement right now mostly is pickleball. But that's something that is so all-inclusive of all generations, all times of day, that it really fits parks. And I'm usually out there every day. And I see pickleball, skateboarders, and walkers, both dog walkers and road walkers. So they're like using it all day long. And I think the fact that we have, and Lacey maintains their parks really, really well. This avenue for people to get exercise, to interact. I've got to believe it even helps lower crime rates and to have that accessibility. So I really believe in parks. I think it's a good use of our funds.
You do too.
Yeah.
I'm Lauren Howard, mother of three, Army wife. I actually was raised in this community and then left after I married my husband in 2003. He was stationed at JBLM, which was still Fort Lewis, I think, back then. So we were stationed at Fort Lewis, and we left for about a decade and came back about a decade later, or from now. And as a mother of three, I have a child who's, my middle kiddo is pretty impacted by disabilities. And it just means the world to be able to go out into Lacey and have access to inclusive playgrounds where all of my kids can play together, and we don't have to find the one playground that has, you know, the amenities or the things that all of my kids can be together and playing at one time. So that's just a huge part for me, is just making sure that we're as inclusive and accessible and accommodating as we can be in our community for all community members. So removing the barriers to access.
I'm Ruth Weigelt, and part of a vibrant community, I feel, is a robust park system, and I think we do have, Lacey does have that, and I'm very proud of that. And you hear a lot of comments when I was out doing surveys with Jenny, what was that? We were out talking to people, but anyway, they just really were complimentary towards Lacey and our parks system. So I want to make sure that we keep that, we're able to maintain it.
Well, my name is Mark Brown, and kind of hard question to answer. My wife and I have been here now for 50 years, and she and I and our daughters have benefited greatly from parks and recreation programs provided by the city of Lacey. Both personally and professionally, parks and recreation, outdoor recreation have been a big part of my life. I happen to think that parks and recreation is absolutely a critical public service. It's as important as anything else we do. Frankly, like public libraries, I think of parks and recs as kind of an equalizer, to be honest with you. And so I've just was happy to see that there was an opportunity for someone like me with my background to maybe make a contribution over the next few months as we figure out in the broadest strokes where we're going and how we're going to get there.
That was a good answer.
Yeah, all of these are good answers. I'm Wendy Bidwin. I am the Lacey Parks Culture and Recreation Chair currently. And I worked on the project for the surveys. And I think that was 2 years ago. 2 years ago for that. And so I was excited to be a part of the fun committee. That's what everybody calls Lacey Parks, and I enjoy that. I want us to have a space where it's fun, that people can come and be together, and we have so many free programs. My kids have enjoyed it, and me as parents have enjoyed that we have free events for community members. So it kind of levels the playing field for us to all enjoy green space, and they are accessible by via public transit. I am so proud of the work that Lacey has done to make sure everyone feels included in it.
Excellent. My name's Haley Ortega. I'm fairly new to Lacey. This will be my second year, but I have grown up in the area. I work at North Thurston Public Schools. So last year I was the Director of Activities, Arts and Athletics. So I worked very closely with Lacey Parks and Rec and just working on space. And that was a great partnership. I loved getting to know people. I have 2 children and my husband also works in the school system, but I am deeply committed to our younger generation of children and having access to quality spaces and being outside. And so I feel very grateful to be a part of this and continue the partnership.
I'm Brooklyn McReynolds. I'm going into 11th grade, 16. That would make me the youth member. I really value our parks for the way that they build individual health and community health. I, grew up, I'll go to my siblings' T-ball games and like hang out with my friends. We'll play at the parks by the ball fields, and I think it's really good for our environment and our community.
My name is John Hagwood. On my personal life, I've benefited greatly from the park system. With our son, we have used these for years. I've been in the cities for 13 years now. Since I moved here with the military and professionally, and I guess semi-professionally with the city. I'm one of the commissioners on the Commission on Equity. Whenever the opportunity came up, I was looking forward to adding an equitable lens to our funding work group for the parks program. I'm going to make sure that we continue the great work that we're doing to make our parks more accessible and equitable.
I'm Sherry Wilkins, and I've been in Thurston County for about 35 years. Raised my kids through the parks and now my grandkids, and I just thought it'd be a great opportunity to be involved in seeing what's happening and how we're gonna build more. Coolio Park, I'm excited about that one. And I'm a realtor, and so it's important for me to know the positives for the community.
I'm Kathy Cook, and I'm fairly new to Lacey. We've been here about 4 years, but I'm a retired Parks and Rec professional, I guess. I was with the National Park Service for 34 years. So when I saw this, I thought it'd be, a good fit. And I really love what the parks that I use here in Lacey for walking, go down to the rack and see the, kids at their baseball games and at playgrounds. And so it'll be a great opportunity for me to see what else is in the works here in Lacey. I'm a real believer in the multi-generational opportunities through Parks and Recs, the different programs that are available. Lacey's done a good job of integrating cultural resources within your programs as well. So this will just be a good opportunity for me to get more acquainted with Lacey Parks and Recs as well.
Well, all y'all are a real hard act to follow. I'll do my best. I'm retired. I moved here 3 years ago from a little community called Olympia. I spent 23 years with the state of Washington's. When I first started, it was called the Interagency Committee for Outdoor Recreation. It's now known as the Recreation Conservation Office. What did I do? I wrote little things like the Washington State Trails Plan. I did research and assessments on boating access, trail access, and so on. I helped write grant program rules. I helped write grant program evaluation instruments. In fact, I spent 6 hours today on an RCO committee reviewing trail applications. So I'm very interested in the opportunity to share what knowledge I might have with y'all. I did want to point out, I'm very impressed by the number of women around the table, by the way. I appreciate seeing that. And I enjoy working in these kinds of situations. I spent 23 years as what's called a character actor for Ballet Northwest. I didn't dance. I was on stage in roles such as the King in Sleeping Beauty or Don Quixote. I was the Don in that. And it was fantastic working with women in those settings, and had to share that. Thank you for indulging me.
You want to go next?
Everybody, sorry I wanted to be there, but I am recovering from a summer cold, so I am virtual today. My name is Yvette Temple, and in my real life, I'm a commercial banker, so funding is right up my alley. I recently moved to Lacey after being an only resident for 15 years. I bought a house in Lacey. And I've always thought the parks and everything, especially when my children were younger, were wonderful. Side note, I'm a huge Parks and Recs fan, and I just have to say I have a fascination from watching that show for years. But I really hope to see, as far as the funding and the grants, that part, what I can help bring to the table. And for the first lady who spoke about pickleball, I was so excited. My daughter took me to play pickleball for the first time for my birthday. We spent $40 an hour, and then come to find out Rainier Vista right down the street from my house has it for free. So that's something I'm really excited to share with people as well. And so I just wanted to, being a new citizen to Lacey, I wanted to see how I could help my community, and this was the opportunity that presented itself. So thank you.
Philip, you want to go next?
Looks like he's muted.
Was that my invitation? I'm so sorry.
Yes, yeah, do you want to go next and tell us?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So thank you for having me. Actually, my name is Philip Roybal. I moved to Lacey in 2019. My wife is active duty military. I previously spent a career in the military. Now I'm a special education teacher there at Nisqually Middle School. So I'm really looking forward to, me and my wife have 5 children. I have 2 older children also. So we have 7 total children in our family. And so I'm really looking forward to inclusivity and how we can work together to build good relationships, also looking to improve things for our children. I've been blessed enough to be able to coach some wrestling, football, and t-ball in our area. I'm actually in Oklahoma right now. Unfortunately, my grandmother passed away Thursday after we had said we're going to come together on Wednesday last week when I got the email. So thank y'all for still letting me attend. So I'm actually in Oklahoma right now attending my grandmother's funeral. And so it's been really great to at least listen in on what's going on. Again, it just shows the care that we have for our community, that all of you showed up and y'all still allowed me to attend. And again, I'm just really looking forward to how we can build our community better and also make things better for our next generations of parks and rec areas, but also for us as we age, as we get older, to be able to access things also. So thank you so much.
Thank you for being here. If anybody needs to stand up and stretch their legs, please feel free. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just right down here.
Yeah, does everyone need to take a quick break? Yep.
Yeah, why don't we do
Right.
that? So we will pause the meeting at 7:07.
Yeah, and she told me in advance, actually.
So I've been in Lacey for years too.
So if everybody could be back in 5 minutes, that would be great. So at 7:12.
I got a job down here. Evolution of state employees. And we moved from, you're at the University of Washington, Julie, and I lived in Ballard. And Julie was 6 months pregnant with Megan when we moved down here. So I always know Megan's age and yeah. But yeah, we've been there a long time. There was only one.
I just would like to remind you guys that you are not muted.
But outside of the
Yeah,
city,
I'm not sure.
for I think
Yeah,
about 6
we know.
years, but other than that,
Okay.
actually always been in the
Not
city
sure if we're
limits.
supposed to or not, but
Thank
you.
Yeah, there
Stay
you go.
there and-
There
Yeah.
you go. I'm hungry. Dinner. Go grab a sweatshirt. It's cold.
That was our
Yeah.
one. So we went into.
I don't know where, I know you're from.
The chamber, because
Yeah.
it's attached.
Yeah. I don't go in.
I don't either.
It's just different. It is very different. I feel bad because I always used to go. The Y had me go to the last Thurston County Chamber. Because they were filling the table and they were one of the sponsors. And so, I mean, the room was full.
This is this of the front.
St. Martin's, you know, and it was good. And I don't know, I go to the chamber and I don't even.
I know, that's-
Chamber.
That's what I find, because I used to go to both of them, both
Uh-huh.
Thurston and Lacey.
Yes.
And then I kind of moved just to Lacey
original.
And now when I go back to the Thurston, it's like
And that
a foreign
resolution.
country. You don't know anybody in it, like,
So the updated resolutions.
yeah, but they always do a good program.
Yeah, we didn't touch
I guess.
Very
well.
Yeah, definitely sure you know.
Yeah. Yep.
But
That's the other thing is when I go to these things, everybody knew me as Jerry
we are not
White.
voting on the
Yeah, so he's
resolution.
not going to anything anymore. And it's like, well, who are you?
I just didn't know if that happened last.
Jerry White.
I was saying that that wasn't.
No, I really am my own person.
You're only with kids, right? You're Jess's mom.
Actually.
Do you get your own name? I know, it happens. They have to leave the house, but eventually you get your own name back, yeah.
But still, when you're out, if you hear somebody call mom, you still look around.
I guess I was just confused because it says look at
Well,
exhibit A.
yeah, I chaired Lacey Spring Fun Fair for years.
Right.
Yeah, I was with them from the start. So.
Madeline White is a good friend of mine.
Okay, I didn't want to confuse everyone here because we're not really.
We're not voting
I
on that.
spread my running toward
Yep,
not too long.
we're not voting.
Certainly email out the most updated ones. if that's-
Yeah, I
Going
want to
retirement.
Yeah.
Good catch.
So I was.
Took a big trip. Yes, now she's bouncing back and forth in between Chehalis and Mossy Rock area and trying to sell her home, but have a good inventory of homes, but no buyers this year. So it really flipped.
Yeah, I knew she was selling.
This too will change.
Yeah.
It's because you didn't actually apply, because you were,
Oh.
So how's your new position?
because.
What is your new
people
position?
Already on board.
I
with
moved
commissions.
into
You just submitted your name.
HR.
Oh,
You
okay,
didn't actually-
cool.
You're not.
Oh,
I'm proud of you, Stephanie. Everybody else.
Because it's a team.
No, I'm like, so
So I
that's
was
what.
pretty
you're-
voting or non-voting.
Other directors upstairs.
Some of the,
Who's the lady that took his place?
non-voting members.
Brooks.
Angela.
And she used to be at River Ridge for years, yeah, as an activities coordinator and teacher, and it's back in the district. She was at Clover Park, I think, for 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, she, well, my girlfriend, she right now started.
Well, you guys
Was a
are.
planning
Well, so we're gonna reconvene here.
She moved up here, was a planning principal, and she and I have been friends ever since she got here. But she's now in,
All right.
Timberland.
but I wanted to tell her that I'd met Angela.
I'm sitting right on that and sometimes it moves.
Yeah, you can move it all the way back.
Okay.
Not really
Each
each other. Okay, a little better.
Okay, we're reconvening at 7:12
It's
PM.
nothing personal, it's this.
That's okay.
Ruth, she likes me better.
Yeah, okay, okay.
Okay, thank you. Welcome back. Hope you guys got a little rest. So we are going to now start talking about the funding work group advisory board handbook and rules of procedure, which those were included in your agenda packet. So we're just gonna do a City of Lacey overview and go over the handbook standards. The official name is the Advisory Board Handbook Standards, Protocols, and Ground Rules. Again, it was in your packet. And then also the work group rules of procedure, which is just a draft version, and we will need to have you vote on that at our next meeting. So an overview of the City of Lacey at the very top, which you can't really see, but it is there, trust me, is the Lacey City community. And right under that, that's who we are accountable to, our community members. And right under that are our city council members. The boards and commissions right over here are an offset to the city council. They advise city council, but ultimately city council has final authority. They can make changes to recommendations given by boards and commissions. Obviously, you know that this, yes, I know, it's not a perfect slide. It is in your packet, and we're not gonna go over all of them, so. Right under city council is city manager's department, and our city manager is Rick Walk. And the city manager department is really responsible for the day-to-day implementation of the council priorities and goals. And then down here is the Parks and Recreation Department, and I think you all are pretty well aware of what we do. One thing that's important to note, which Jen will get into a little bit later, is our Parks Maintenance Department, who makes our parks so beautiful. They are part of the Public Works Department. So it's a little different than some other, how other parks are structured. Overview of the city, we were incorporated in 1966. We have a council manager system of government, which means that we have an elected council with a professional city manager who is appointed by the council but is responsible for city administration. We have 9 boards that advise city council, 2 regional advisory boards, and now 2 ad hoc work groups. So the other ad hoc work group is the Human Services Work Group, which is also fairly new to the city. And an ad hoc work group is created for a specific purpose as needed. So our advisory board handbook is, so we're gonna get a little bit more into the interpersonal standards, protocols, and ground rules. So this is really just a handbook that was recently updated, and it actually goes into effect September 2nd. So very, very newly updated, and it's included in your packet. The most updated version is always going to be on our city website. There's a tab for advisory board page. We won't go into every detail of the handbook, just the most important items on it. And this is really just the best practices for working as a group. So promote, collaborate, be respectful, and be professional and courteous. Don't criticize in public, address issues in private when possible, listen and be respectful, avoid interrupting, be mindful of conflicts of interest, don't speak for the entire board, arrive on time, be prepared for meetings, and don't be misled by the strong demands of special interest groups. Try to find the long-term public interest of the community as a whole. Regarding conflicts of interest, if there is a conflict of interest that comes up for anybody, we ask that you don't partake in the conversation or the voting. But if that is anything that you're concerned about, please reach out before the meeting and we can talk through that. Just basic, just avoid texting or emailing or receiving calls during the meeting. I don't anticipate that's going to be a problem for this group. It seems like you're all pretty courteous folks. So strive for consensus, participate with dignity and decorum, ask questions. That's really the best way. You know, we really are going to try to anticipate questions that might come up, but really ask questions if something seems, you know, it's really the best way to learn. Vote yes or no on motions. Don't abstain except when there's a conflict of interest.
I can't. I already got in trouble.
Right. For those of you that can vote, please vote when you're allowed. And I'm sorry we didn't go over that. I'm sorry we didn't go over this until now. That was, yeah, unfortunate. And then we also ask that you vote verbally, and we'll announce to Carter, you do have to track who's voted yay or nay. So, you know, don't nod your head or raise your hand, please use your words. And then I know we just went over a ton of open meeting laws, and I think it was mentioned briefly in there. When we send emails, we'll try to do it as like a blind CC, and that is on purpose so that nobody can reply all, which, as you might have caught in there, that is creating an actual meeting. So if we ever send an email that's not blind CC, please don't reply all. So this is very unlikely to happen, but we do have to go over removal of a member just in case. I can't imagine that would happen, but removal of a member could be for inefficiency, neglect of duty, unlawful act, violation of our handbook. If you have been unexcused for 3 or more meetings, but cannot be removed or should not be removed for disagreeing with the board or a recommendation. If any of those issues come up, the mayor or their designee will conduct a fact-finding process to assess their actions meet the criteria for removal. So conflict of interest, so if there is a conflict of interest, again, just let me know. Well, you would need to notify the group publicly and remove yourself from discussion and voting on that item. If you are allowed to vote, thank you, Ruth. We are going to use the Robert's Rules of Order, which is a parliamentary procedure on how to conduct fair meetings. Included in your packet was kind of a guideline overview of parliamentary procedures. It can be a little intimidating, I think. Have any of you been in meetings or boards that use those rules of procedure? Are you pretty comfortable with those? So we will help you along the way, but just don't be intimidated to speak, I guess is my message to you. It's just a process on conducting fair meetings, and the overview is that everyone has a right to speak before someone speaks twice. You have to be recognized by the chair to speak. A motion must be seconded in order for issue to be forwarded and discussed. And if you're in favor, you vote by saying yay or nay. And the other topic that's pretty important for this group is voting and non-voting members. So it's a little unusual because we have voting and non-voting members. Typically in a board or commission, everybody is a voting member. So some of our non-voting members in this group serve on other boards and commissions, and so that is why you're not allowed to vote here. Also, some folks don't live in the city limits or UGA, so that's why we have some non-voting members. However, I just want to mention how important their background is and the experience that they have to this group. So really all the participation is really going to be valuable to coming to a really great resolution with this group. So just unfortunately, we're not able to vote or make motions in some situations. So at our next meeting, we will have the election of officers, and that will be a chair and a vice chair position. And they will need to be elected by voting members. We talked a little bit about this already, about public comment. So in person, anybody who comes will need to sign in at the meeting. Online, 2 hours in advance of the meeting. Written, we get email public comment, and those will get forwarded to you prior to the meeting. If that happens, they're not addressed during the meeting, so we'll give it to you, but we don't address it during the meeting. And each person can make 3 minutes of comment, but a maximum of 30 minutes per meeting. Our meetings are all going to start at 5:30, about two Mondays per month. I've sent the schedule out, so hopefully everybody's aware of that. And we're going to try to end by 7:30. What time is it now?
7:22.
Okay, maybe not tonight. And so I'm going to be your point of contact. Future meeting notices might come from Carter, but please let me know if you have any questions, and I'm really excited about the work that we're going to be doing. Yeah.
I do have a question.
Okay.
And that is, how do you define consensus?
Majority.
Thank you.
I mean, by my math, that means 5. Okay.
Questions, yeah. Good math. Any other questions for Jenny or any of us?
I'm not sure if it's an appropriate question, but when you went over the Public Works Department being in charge of maintenance, so if we got something approved by City Council, how does that impact their budget to maintain it? I mean, are we coordinated in some manner?
Yes.
Okay.
There's separate departments, but it doesn't really make a difference in how it's viewed from the public, or if there was a project that was added, we work pretty seamless with them.
Okay,
So thank you. Great question.
Yeah, and we'll get into how important maintenance and operation and those dollars are. You're not going to want to build something that you can't maintain.
It's a waste of money if it's not maintained.
Yeah, good thing to bring it. All right, so we are on to our last agenda item, 6E, workgroup overview. And depending on how many questions, we should get you out of here far past 7:30. So I am just, so excited for this. I just, again, want to thank you for committing to be on this important work group. This is really going to impact the future of Lacey and its parks, culture, recreation programs. And so it's just hugely important. And it's really nice to hear around the table just how important this is to everyone else in the room as well. So yeah, super appreciate it. I also just want to acknowledge staff, particularly Jenny and Carter, who have just put a lot of time already into this and will continue to do so. So I just feel very grateful for them and all of their efforts and support as well. So I know that we have thrown a lot at you tonight. We appreciate your patience as we check off, the housekeeping. But we're going to dive in here to what we're actually going to be doing together. Quick overview of what I'm going to talk about. We'll talk about Lacey Parks. We'll talk about the work group deliverables and goals, touch on communication, and then look at schedules and agendas. Lacey Parks, that being said, we just want to briefly review the services that we currently provide to the community. So Parks, Culture, Recreation has 18 full-time employees, and then we have the 22 full-time employees from Public Works. That makes the almost complete package of who provides these services, because I say almost complete because we have many part-time staff and contracted instructors and businesses that help us, pull off all of these things for the community and such a wide variety of offerings. There are 1,269 acres of park property that we oversee. That includes 26 developed parks and trails. We have over 7 miles of trails, and the 7.2 miles of trails are just the ones that are called trails, like Karen Fraser Woodland Trail or the William Ives Trail. We are currently just launching our process to actually get a count of all of the other types of trails, so like the soft surface trails. So our parks maintenance is going to be taking the lead on that with some community help. So we're super excited for that to tell a more complete story. The park spaces in Lacey, like we've talked about maintenance, they would not be possible without park maintenance staff who work every day to ensure parks and facilities are in the best conditions possible. They maintain trails, plant trees, they do pruning, respond to graffiti and vandalism, and just so much more on a daily basis. And yes, we do have a great collaboration. I think sometimes I spend more time with the parks maintenance supervisor than my own staff, and it just depends on what's going on. And he doesn't report to me, but we, have a very collaborative relationship. We're all on the same team. We offer up to approximately 1,000 programs per year between sports and fitness, aquatics, museum, and community recreation programs. So think like day camps, teen camps, trips and tours, classes. And we also have approximately 30 special events per year that are free to the public. Most of them are free to the public. Lacey is known for its sports facilities, such as the Regional Athletic Complex and Rainier Vista Park, sports and fitness staff book fields and run leagues and programs at both city and school district sites. I know Haley touched on the partnership we have with North Thurston Public Schools, and we'll get into that more. But our staff actually does book sports fields and also the 3 North Thurston Public School pools for community use, after the priority of obviously the kids that are going to school. We have amazing facilities such as the Lacey Community Center, Jacob Smith House, and the Lacey Museum. And these serve as important spaces to gather, celebrate, and learn for the public. In addition, we offer park rentals during peak seasons at several locations, whether that's the entire park, like Huntermer, if a group wants to book out that entire park, or one of the many park shelters that we have at our locations. We also have a financial assistance program. We have a volunteer program and a sponsorship program. That gives you just a quick, in a nutshell, of what we do.
Excuse me.
Oh, yes, go ahead.
What's your annual budget?
So great question. And we're gonna get into that more as we go along. We have, so there's the 2 sides of the operation. And so I'll just quickly pull up, as soon as I get done with these slides, I'll pull up the annual report real quick and we can take a glimpse at that. It's roughly 3 million for Parks, Culture, Recreation, just a quick answer. And then the parks maintenance, I'm just not recalling off the top of my head. But then we also have the capital improvement budget as well. So the comprehensive plan Well, and so on that note, actually, great segue, we also partner with not only Parks Maintenance under Public Works, but also the Capital Projects team that is also under Public Works. And that's for development and renovation of park spaces. So on this slide, you'll see the comprehensive plan, the cover sheet, that was updated in 2023. That's a 6-year plan. And so it was pretty recently updated. It's our department's guiding document, and it's part of the city's overall comprehensive plan. It's just one section of that. But the comp plan does contain that PCIP that I touched on earlier, and that's the culmination of the public, staff, and other stakeholder input to satisfy outstanding needs in Parks and Recreation in Lacey. And we'll spend quite a bit of time diving into the comp plan. But as far as the work group deliverables and goals, so for this work group specifically, you'll be helping identify sustainable funding for future parks improvements to balance our aging infrastructure and growing population. We're so grateful to have community voices from a wide range of backgrounds and perspectives, to help shape the future of our park system. So as outlined by Resolution 1156, adopted by the City Council, this Parks Improvement Funding Work Group's purpose is to review parks expansion and replacement projects identified in the 6-year PCIP, analyze all available funding options, and recommend to the Lacey City Council a funding package identifying funding sources, including recommended amounts to implement a prioritized list of parks capital projects by December of 2024. So that's a mouthful. To boil it down, we have staff experts, subject matter experts that are going to be coming in to review that PCIP and potential funding sources with you all. You'll work as a group to review and consider those options against the needs of the community, and then develop a formal recommendation for the council to consider that prioritizes the projects and funding solutions for them. Nope. Oh, thank you. And this is the 2023? This is, or excuse me, 2024 budget. At 2023 on the brain from the comp plan. Parks Maintenance 2024 budget is just over 4 million. And the Parks and Rec budget is 3.5 million. And oh shoot, so the buildings, the community buildings may not be in that. Parks and Rec, is that in there? We'll need to. I'll share a screen from the annual report, so. All right. Work group members. Just met everybody, except for one person who wasn't here, so we'll meet them next time. Estimated timeline, so as you know, the work group was formed by council on June 4th. The appointments were made August 6th. Here we are at our first meeting tonight, and then August through December, we have the work that's gonna happen, and then the recommendation finalized in December. All meetings will have an in-person and virtual option. The exception to this is the October 4th Parks Tour meeting. This will be in person only on Friday. That'll be at noon. And since this isn't a traditional advisory board, but instead a working group, to fully participate in breakout groups and other similar activities, we really encourage you to attend in person, and we'll be, getting up and moving around a little bit. And it's perfectly fine to attend online, of course, and we know that there are extenuating circumstances. But just maybe make an effort to be here in person. The meeting schedule is subject to change as the needs arise for the work group, and to keep our work on track, staff have drafted topics, activities, discussions, and presentations for the meetings. Again, these are subject to change pending direction of the work tasks and as needs arise. But to get us oriented, I thought I'd just give a quick, overview of what we're considering for each meeting at this point anyway. So staff will send out the agenda and packet ahead of each meeting. That'll be about a week before. And those will be published online as well for the public. To make the best use of our time together during these meetings, just make sure if you could review the agenda and packet ahead of the meeting. And then additionally, in those emails will be a request for you to respond confirming your attendance and indicating whether you'll be in person or virtual for the upcoming meeting. And this is important so that we know ahead of time that we have a quorum and preparing items, you know, ahead of the meeting on our end and to make sure you don't end up with an unexcused absence. There may be other times staff need to contact you between meetings as needs arise. So we ask that you do your best to be responsive for the success of the work group. And then just like I said, just a quick overview. So next meeting, which will be September 16th, we have the chair and vice chair elections. We'll have the voting on the rules of procedure. We've got a couple of participation things planned. There'll be one or two at each meeting. And so you can kind of look ahead here for September 16th. What are your priorities as compared to the community's priorities? We will dive into that comprehensive plan and the community engagement that we've done. As we said earlier, we'll look at the maintenance program overview. We'll actually have our Parks Maintenance Supervisor attending, Jamie Oakland, for that meeting. And then we'll have our PCIP program overview that day, kind of a higher level for that day. Then moving into the end of September, we'll look at historic funding for parks. We will do another participation exercise, and then we will dive into the in-depth financials and potential new sources. And we'll have our finance director, Troy Wu, here for that discussion. October 4th, we are going to do that tour. That is a Friday. We totally understand that some people are not able to make it, but we'd love it if you could join us. So we're trying to get the date out there really far in advance. So we're going to take a look at places that are the most relevant to the PCIP. And then we do understand that folks might not be able to make it. So we will be doing a recap with some slides at that next meeting on the 14th. And we'll have a couple of different participation components that night. We'll look at our initial PCIP priorities and then take a look after the presentation at what maybe those top priorities are starting to be. We will also talk about capital projects and design process and just really make sure that you all know all the different things that go into a capital project. And so we'll have someone from our Public Works Capital Improvement team here for that night. And October 28th, we'll recap available funding. We'll have another exercise, breakout groups. We'll do a post-breakout pulse check with you all. And then into November 4th, we will have some additional guiding questions and discussion. And we will, the hope would be for that night to start drafting the recommendation to council. And then into later November, potentially, if we're ready, if the group is ready, vote on a formal recommendation, and then December 2nd as needed. And into December, we'll have to figure that out as we go along. Because we'll have a better idea of where we are. So again, we made it through these. Happy to answer any questions, and then I'm gonna pull up some budget information for you so you can take a look at it. Yes, Mark?
My turn?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I had 3 or 4 questions, and the outline for future agendas, I think, answers most of them. On the funding side, in addition to historic funding, I think we should also talk about what's available that we haven't taken advantage of, like Metropolitan Park District, creating a Metropolitan Park District, for example. So not just looking at how we've received funding on the capital and operating side, grants and all of that, but what's out there in terms of statutory options. Of course, additional bonding capacity for the city would be something I think we'd like to see. So that's one thing. The second thing was, let's see, what was the first? Oh, it sounds like you are going to share with us, because some of us, myself included, certainly don't know what the vision is that's on the books now in terms of long-range planning. I'd like to know, there's been a lot of effort putting together a comprehensive vision for where we want to go. And so I hope we can really get into the weeds on that so we can understand more fully what that encompasses, and perhaps also look at what the costs are associated with realizing that vision. And then the final thing, and this is something that I think I've mentioned what would success look like for us? I mean, when we're all said and done and we're part of the history, not the current, what would we want to be able to say we accomplished? What's success look like? So hopefully you can kind of capture that and address that going forward.
Yeah, and so you're saying to consider that, or are you asking me the question right now of what success looks like?
Well, it's,
To clarify.
I think, sure, I mean, if you want to answer it now, but I'm just saying that's, I always struggle with, you know, what success look like. I'm serving on another ad hoc committee right now that's looking at a statewide organization and their future. And it's like, you know, when we're all said and done, what will have been a successful effort by all of us to hand off to you to implement?
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, great considerations and thoughts. And I think what success looks like is really being able to, you know, hit those deliverables and come up with a recommendation to council as a first, you know, first check off for success. And then the second thing is really to, you know, look at our guiding document, that comprehensive plan, and see that the future success of Lacey is being considered. So, you know, we've got there's a lot of information in that document. Obviously, it's that culmination of community input for first and most importantly, and then the staff input, and then also from our boards and commissions and our city council. It's that culmination. And so it's, you know, success is what is the best path forward with these planning efforts to look out for the vision of the future of Lacey. Because we're not all gonna be around, right? We wanna set Lacey up for that long-term success. And there's, you know, and looking at those challenges in that comprehensive plan, which we'll get into, but it's, you know, it's basically keeping up with growth, you know, and looking at long-term sustainable funding for the park system. So that continues to support the community. Any other questions? Yes, John.
On the fourth, when we do the tour, is the plan for us to carpool together to the different sites, or are we just meeting up at one, or?
Yeah, so we have vans, 15 passenger vans that we use to take the community out on trips and tours and programs. So we would utilize those. Yeah.
Perfect, thank you.
Yep.
But if you wanna take your own.
Yes, and actually, you know, if the public wants to participate, so what we've done before with the Parks Board is we publish the tour route and then we provide a cell phone number. So we wouldn't have enough room to transport the public, but if they wanna come, they could certainly do that and just call us, cause the times vary depending on how long it takes. They could be like, you know, where are you now? Then we would be able to tell them.
And since it is October 4th, dress appropriately. If we go out to Great Kuyu, it is not, there's no trails or anything. So we've had people show up and.
That's the one on Carpenter, right?
Huh?
That's the one on Carpenter?
Yeah, it's not, there's no, yeah.
I'm very familiar with the area.
Yeah, so I just, dress according, especially in October. It'll be a nice wet one.
And then I did want to, let's see, Mark, you brought up a point about funding options available, and yes, that's absolutely included in what we have planned, and we do already actually have a slide prepared. There was a good discussion at the April 23rd City Council work session, so if anybody, you know, wants to watch that, you'll be getting a lot of the duplicate information, but that's a good one. There is a slide on available funding options, but there might be some from this group that hadn't been considered before. We've got a lot of knowledge in this room, so. And then I wanted to speak to the budget question. Did you have something on it?
I'm just gonna pass out their stuff that I need them to.
Oh,
sign.
perfect. Okay. Let's see, let me just
Okay, well, he's
check my messages here.
Did you get the comprehensive plan? Does everybody know where to find the comprehensive plans?
No, sorry, I was just gonna text my babysitter.
Okay, I'll need both of them. You share, they share it at the next meeting.
Leave them with you. Yes, leave them with you.
Carbon copies.
Carter.
Big person, yeah.
What is it?
I'll come around the other way.
That's okay. Okay, so we have, so I've got some information. Thank you, Carter, for pulling that. According to the annual report, so recreation programs, 2.5 million.
And you don't work too much.
I look at my watch 57 times a day. I'm like, what day is it still that day? I don't know.
So we're not turning this back in or?
I'm trying to get it out.
I think they keep them on file.
Everything.
Yeah. What is our title?
Yeah, so
There is no spare time.
I'll bring you,
Non-voting
I'll bring the budget information to the next meeting. I'll put a slide in there for you.
Tell me something.
Okay,
Spirit over.
And you done with a question mark.
It's Yvette and Philip, I just sent out forms, but I will email them to you.
That's absolutely fine. Thank you.
So if everybody else could fill out, sign the certificate and leave those, and then fill out the form for the stipend program. And then I will also email this, but this is the QR code for the demographic. I'll come around and I'll put a couple of copies.
If you've already done that, we don't do it again, right? We don't need our demographic.
You have to do it again because
They want it for this one.
It's not gonna mess up your data.
They want it for every group.
Oh, do you know which group it's coming from?
Parks funding advisory.
It's the metadata part of it, so like the commission pieces and then the work groups, and then also like our advisory panel.
So you're looking at them separately as each.
They're still not, but like by Ken, was in 15 of us. So it's anonymous, but it's a small group.
Okay, yep. It's gonna be weird because you get multiple of the same person. Two veterans, I guess.
It's not working. Yeah, here, I'll pass it down to you. Thank you.
And then real quick on the budget, thank you to our finance director. So we have for parks, community and recreation, which includes community buildings and the regional athletic complex, is 5.88 million. And then public works maintenance is 4.15 million. So that's why I was pausing because it wasn't coming in high enough in my head. So now that we have the number, that is yeah, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That is approximately $10 million to answer your question, Mark.
Thank you.
Not including capital projects.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yes, I will make this back.
And then I think for this portion, we can go ahead and adjourn the meeting at 7:47 PM. And then this portion is you can just stay as long as you need to get the help. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hope to see you guys in person next time.
Sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you also. Thank you.